Hello, Ton. Hello, millionaire. Hello, Audrey. Didn't stay in the cloud. No, I do not reside in any clouds. Hello, Robert. Good to see you. DC. I don't have any plans to go to DC. Oh, to Virginia. Yeah. Yeah. Wednesday to Monday is Bante Rahula's retreat. Okay, friends. So let's get started. Since we have a good amount of people with us, we'll get started with some chanting. Hello, Maxwell. That's the link to the Magasega chanting book. We're on page 69. Maxwell, do I know you under a different name on the Discord or Facebook, or are you finding us here on YouTube? Okay, so we're going to be doing all right. Well, welcome, Maxwell. I hope you enjoyed Dhammapalooza. So let's get things started with some chanting on page 69. Dhamma Niyamata Sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Evang me sutang ekang samayang bhagava savattiyang viharati jetavane anatha pindakassa arame tatra ko bhagava bhikkhu amantesi bhikkavoti badante tite bhikkhu bhagavato paccasso sung bhagava etaddavocha Upadava bhikkave tatagatanang anupadava tatagatanang titavasa dhatu dhammatittata dhammaniyamatta sabbe sankara anicca tang tatagato abhisambujjati abhisammeti abhisambujjitva abhisammetva akchikanti Achikkati deseti panyapeti pattapeti vivarati vibhajyati attani karoti sabba sankara anicchati. Upadava bhikkhave tathagathanang anupadava tathagathanang tittavasa dhatu dhammatittata dhammaniyamata sabbe sankara dukkha sabthang tathagato abhisambhujyati abhisammeti abhisambhujitva abhisamvetva. Achikkati deseti panyapeti pattapeti vivarati vibhajyati uttani karoti sabba sankara dukkati. Upadava bhikkhave tathagathanang anupadava tathagathanang titavasa dhatu dhammatittata dhammaniyamata sabbe dhamma anatta tang tathagato abhisambhujyati abhisammeti abhisambhujitva abhisammetva achikkati deseti panyapeti pattapeti vivarati vibhajyati uttani karoti sabbe dhamma anattati. Idang vocha bhagava attamanadhe bhikkhu bhagavato bhasitung abhinandunti. All right, now the English. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Sublime One was living near Savatthi, at Jeta's Grove in the park of Anathapindika. The Sublime One said to the bhikkhus, "Bhikkhus, yes, venerable sir," those bhikkhus replied. The Sublime One then said, "Bhikkhus, whether Tathagatas appear or do not appear, there is this established element of Dhamma, this fixed law of Dhamma. All that is conditioned is impermanent. A Tathagata fully awakens to this and fully understands it. So awakened and thus understanding, he announces, points out, declares, establishes, expounds, explains, and clarifies it. All that is conditioned is impermanent. Bhikkhus, whether Tathagatas appear or do not appear in the world, there is this established condition of Dhamma, this fixed law of Dhamma. All that is conditioned is unsatisfactory. A Tathagata fully awakens to this and fully understands it. So awakened and thus understanding, he announces, points out, declares, establishes, expounds, explains, and clarifies it. All that is conditioned is unsatisfactory. Bhikkhus, whether Tathagata appear or do not appear, there is this established condition of Dhamma, this fixed law of Dhamma. All Dhammas are without self. A Tathagata fully awakens to this and fully understands it. So awakened and understanding, he announces, points out, declares, establishes, expounds, explains, and clarifies it. All Dhammas are without self. Thus spoke the Sublime One. Delighted, those bhikkhus rejoiced in what the Sublime One had said. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. So you were here last Dhammapalooza. Very well, Maxwell. Well, thank you. Glad to have you back. All right, let's see who has joined us. Reverie Code. That's another name I'm not familiar with. Do I know you from a Discord or somewhere else? It's always nice to see people who just found us from YouTube, right, or something else. Because oftentimes it's people who are already part of the community, so it's always nice. You're Will. Okay, very good. All right. What does what mean? Oh, Jason. No, this is not sunburn. This is my robe. See, it's like the same color. Maxwell, that's very good. Actually, I had thought about talking about this, the 3 characteristics of existence. It's a very good topic. But let me first do some introductions here. So we want to get things started. So welcome to Dhammapalooza. Every Monday night at this time, we do from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, we do a palooza of Dhamma, a festival, right? A social gathering of Dhamma, right? We come together, we do a variety of different things. We do a little chanting. We just started with some chanting, right? Towards the end, we do some guided meditation. And in between, much of that is up to you guys, right? Sometimes people have lots of questions, so it turns into a big Q&A. Sometimes nobody has much to say, so I read a sutta or talk about a topic, right? But this Dhammapalooza has always been, from the first day, from the ground up, a community event, right? It's not just about me being here yapping for 2 hours, right? And what that means is everybody feels free to be able to chat in the chat, right? To talk to each other, to discuss, etc. You are not interrupting me. You're not bothering me if you're talking in the chat to each other, right? That is what Dhammapalooza is for the community to come together and to discuss, right? So this is a wonderful time for, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, you can put that in the chat. If you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can also put that in the chat. And if nobody has anything, then I have some suttas backed up. However, we do have Maxwell, who has asked a question, so we can start out with the question. So while I'm talking, if you have comments, questions, topics, whatever, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat when I'm not kind of going off on a Dhamma tangent. All right. So this is an interesting one, right? So we just went through the 3 characteristics of existence, right? And the way it goes is, right? Sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha, right? So all, sabbe, sankhara, conditioned things, conditionality. Basically, everything that's not nibbana is sankhara, right? Sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent, unstable, undependable. Okay? Sabbe sankhara dukkha. All conditioned things, when clung to, are dukkha, right? And then it changes a bit, interestingly enough, right? Sabbe dhamma anatta. All phenomena are not self. Right? And the reason this changes is because this also includes that which is beyond sankharas, i.e. nibbana, right? So what this is, there's a history both in the early texts and also later on of people trying to find some kind of permanent self somewhere. Well, obviously that's not a permanent self. Maybe this is a permanent self. Oh, no, that's not a permanent self. Maybe that's a permanent self. There's definitely a permanent self in there somewhere, right? The Buddha very clearly, right off the bat, says there's nothing that's a permanent self. There's nothing that's a permanent soul. You can't find anything at all in conditioned existence or outside of conditioned existence. There is nothing that is atta, permanent, stable, dependable. Right? There's nothing. So the Buddha is making it very clear here. Right? Don't try to find one. If you are trying to find one, it's because of your ignorance. Right? Because of your delusion. An awakened being knows there's nothing to look for. And so sabbe dhamma anatta is very important. Yes. Dhamma is one of those words. Actually, sankhara is another word like that. There's some Pali words that have like 5, 6, 7, even maybe definitions depending on the context. Dhamma is one of those. Dhamma could be a person's teaching, like the Buddha's Dhamma. Dhamma could be the nature of reality, the truth, right? Dhamma also could be all phenomena, right? All experience, every kind of experience. And so in this framework of the three characteristics of existence, that's what this means here, Dhamma. All Dhamma. It doesn't mean all people's teachings are not self, because some of them aren't. Well, I mean, technically they are, but not everybody teaches that. What it means is that everything in existence, all conditioned things and all non-conditioned things are not self. Yeah. So it's a special case that gets switched. Oh, I see the chat is quite quiet tonight. So perhaps we can do a reading. Let's see. There is actually, let's do a very important short reading. And if it's still quiet after that, we can do a much larger reading. But this is Sona Sutta. Some of you already know what this sutta is, right? Very important sutta. All right, so I'll answer Robert's question. Robert has a question. Is it possible to be enlightened without meditation? No. Right? The Buddha seems to say the opposite. Possible without meditation, not without moral conduct or wisdom. It is impossible to become fully awakened without following the totality of the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, from what I understand, although the evidence is kind of scant for this in the early texts, but from what I understand, you can be a faith follower and get up to like being a Sotipanna. You could become a stream enterer simply on faith alone, if your faith is strong enough. Right? But after that, you need meditation. Right? Because you can't start to eradicate your greed and hatred just from faith. Right? That doesn't work. You have to meditate, right? The Buddha says, Sabba papasa akaranang kusalang kusalang. Oh boy, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I did the Pali. Kusalang Nepada. Anyway, so the English goes this way. The abandoning of evil deeds, the performing of good deeds, the cleansing of one's own mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. Right? So the meditation part, kusalasa upasampada. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you. So these all go together. Right? You need the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path. You need that sila, right? You need the dana. You need the samadhi. You need the panya. All of that to become fully awakened. Kusalasa. No, let me see if I can remember it now that I know the words. Sabbapa pasa akaranang kusalasa upasampara sachitta periodapanang etang buddhana sasanang. That's it. All right. Thanks for the thanks for the hint there, Bonte. Much appreciated. All I needed was the one line, and then the rest of it clicked. Okay. Very good. So that's that question answered. Okay, Adriana has a good question. Bante, a few weeks ago, you very briefly spoke about how when one becomes an avatar of the practice or the path, they need not be stressed about how much they're practicing on the cushion because they're always practicing. Wanted to know if you could expand on that. I pondered about it all week. So there's a couple different facets in relation to this. When you've reached a point where most of what you're doing has been very trained over some years, right? You're not kind of worried about, oh, I need to make sure I have X amount of hours a week or this or that, all these kind of things. Am I good? I don't see any connection issues on my end. Reverie is asking if there's a lost connection. Anyone else in the chat? Okay. So when it becomes like a second nature, right? When it's trained, it's not something that you worry about much, right? When you can sit, you can sit. When you can't sit, you practice anyway. You practice Satipatthana, right? Or you practice various reflections, Asubha, Dhammanupassi, whatever, all these different reflections, right? So it's like you're skilled in the path, and you reach a point where all I need to do is keep practicing and moving forward, right? Because you've developed all the tools, at least to an adept's level, right? You're not a master of it yet, obviously, but you've developed it enough that you start to know what you're doing, right? You start to, the path becomes, you're living pretty much all of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path in one day, right? And so it becomes second nature, right? It's not something that you worry about, right? If you get an emergency at work, it's like, well, I guess I'm not meditating, this afternoon. It's okay, right? If you have during the emergency, you can practice Satipatthana, right? You can do all kinds of different practices, right? So it goes along with how I've said before, and especially like how Ajahn Chah says, everything is training. Everything is practice, right? So you're not, get stressed out about that, right? The other thing that I found is you reach a point. So I've come to the conclusion for myself is I really don't necessarily have a say if I'm awakened in this lifetime, right? I could practice very diligently, but there might be various causes and conditions that mean that I have to come back another life. That's the way it is, right? So I don't know what the future holds. All I know is that as I'm following the Noble Eightfold Path, I'm moving towards awakening. I hope this is my last life, but I don't know. All kinds of things can happen, right? I could die tomorrow, right? And my practice is cut off for this life, right? All kinds of things could happen where it's not this life that I'm destined to be awakened in. It's okay, right? But I know that I follow the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm not focused on the future per se in terms of my path. I'm focused on how I'm following the path now, right? And if I'm progressing, right? Every once in a while, once a year, whatever, you kind of judge, like, am I progressing? Am I kind of stuck in a rut, which does happen, right? You plateau, just like any kind of skill. You go through like plateau periods and all that kind of stuff. But you reach a point of kind of confidence and certainty where you just know all you have to do is practice, right? I first learned this from, in my earlier years, there were a lot more insights arising, right? And they were very powerful, very like, wow, this is amazing stuff, right? And in the beginning, you kind of have this feeling of like, I'm changed forever, right? But then the impact of that insight actually starts to fade away. It's not that you lose the insight, but the initial impact of that insight was very strong, right? And then it starts to kind of just come back to normal, right? And so you just kind of have this. And after like 2 or 3 times of that, you just realize, oh, okay, well, it's not good. It's going away. It's good. I've made progress. It's a sign of progress. But this kind of euphoric kind of like, wow, insight, this is amazing, that's going to fade away, right? You're not going to become stupider. It's not like that, like you lose the insight per se. But that initial feeling fades away. That initial kind of wow factor fades away, right? And so what I came to realize, like there were periods of time where I actually kind of got this point where it's like, where are new insights? I want new insights. When are insights coming? Am I practicing bad that I'm not getting insights in this period, right? And I came to the conclusion again over this hard-won wisdom that I don't have any say over when an insight arises. Because what I've realized is I've had insights come like when I'm standing online in a grocery store, right? It's not, you can only do the practice, right? You can only, so, I don't know when insights are going to arise, how they're going to arise, when they're coming. I'm just going to practice, right? And so you practice. It's like Ananda trying to become awakened, right? He practiced really hard because the first council is coming and he has to be an arhat to attend and all these kind of things, right? I suspect even if he wasn't an arhat, they would have allowed him to attend. But anyway, so he was really kind of, I'm going to be it. But then he stopped, and as he's going to put down his head on the pillow, boom, awakening, right? That's how it kind of works, right? It doesn't always come like, you think, when I'm going to sit down to meditate, I'm going to have a wonderful insight. No, right? It maybe the meditation is horrible, right? In terms of you think you want like bliss and everything, but it was really rough meditation, all these kind of things. And then 4 days later, boom, something, an insight from that meditation period, right? So all of those kind of anxieties start to fade away. You know your practice and you move forward, right? That's what I mean by like, because you can't lose it, right? Even if you go through dark periods where you're kind of, your meditation falls apart and all these kind of things. Once you've reached a certain point in practice, a certain point in insight, and a certain point in confidence and faith in the teachings, you could maybe even go months and months and months without really practicing, but it's still there, right? It's still there. And oftentimes your mind is calling you back. Come back. Remember all this, wonderful peace and insights? Come back. Let's practice. Right? Once you've really developed it, once you've become an avatar of the path is not going to leave you. It's going to it would take a lot of time and a lot of really bad behavior on your end to try to actually maybe to have the path really leave you. But so this is, I guess, what I could say about that. I see there's some chat here, so I'm just going to double check on the chat. Robert. Robert asks, how does right livelihood factor into monastic life? Seems like it's the only aspect of the path specifically related to lay life. There's a specific question about this on the Discord today, in the Ask a Monastic, right? About going through Digha Nikaya number 2, about the right livelihood for monastics, right? So various sadhus, various samanas at the time did all kinds of things, right? They read people's fortunes by the entrails of birds, and they chanted protections and all kinds of things, right? And so the Buddha is very clearly tells us, like, as monastics, these are things, I would say the Buddha is much more involved in kind of telling monastics how to be and what not to do, and what not to talk about, etc., than he does lay people, right? And it makes sense, because monastics are supposed to be living a much more restricted life, right? So, any kind of like fortune telling, any kind of like reading signs, any kind of things like that, that's not for monastics, right? Also, there's a bunch of topics that the Buddha says monastics really shouldn't be talking about, which is basically anything but Dhamma. The Buddha says if you don't talk about Dhamma, it's better to be quiet, right? But it's like, talk of kings and generals and ministers, and the talk of the well stuff. Most of you are familiar with that list, right? So, but the Buddhists, that's kind of like what monks really should just be talking about, either Dhamma or be quiet. Now, the problem is a lot of people say, well, Ajahn Chah said, what's Dhamma? Anything, right? So I could just talk about anything and it's Dhamma. That's what we call lawyering the rules. That's going too much. So there's definitely right livelihood for monastics, right? But most of what we would think of of what the Buddha lists as right livelihood, most people aren't doing it today, at least in the West. I mean, in Buddhist countries, like monks can, do like give you amulets and protective amulets and things like that. That's not really right livelihood for monastics either, but it's part of Buddhism, right? So if you want to see somebody who knows about right livelihood for monastics, read the stories of Ajahn Chah. Ajahn Chah understands right livelihood for monastics. That's great. Or you can read Digha Nikaya number 2, the fruits of the contemplative life. Then that's in that the Buddha has a bunch of lists. Oh, you can lawyer the rule. You can lawyer the monastic rules big time. I saw some monks lawyer the rules before I became a monk. And then I have to admit, sometimes I've also lawyered the rules as a monk. It's something that is very easy to slip into, and you have to be very aware of, right? Because Bhante Silananda told me something very wise one day. He says, there are things to understand about how you should act as a monastic that are not in the Vinaya, Right? It's like, and that made me think, oh, right, that's a very interesting statement. Because it in some ways it's more about just the rules as they're written. So it's living the monastic life is quite an interesting experience, and how different traditions and different teachers understand the different rules and how they live those rules, and it's quite an interesting thing. But you can definitely lawyer the rules, and it's almost always never skillful. I mean, I can think of some times where it might be skillful, but mostly it's not really a skillful thing to do. Tan Pamuto, if he's still here, might have some good stuff to say about that too. I mean, he's been a monk twice as long as I have, so he has more experience in that, right? JRF2K, welcome, with a little Kerbal icon. So JRF2K, are you somebody we know from the Discord, or are you following us straight from YouTube? Because that's a name I'm not familiar with. Reverie says, don't bring attachment to your meditation. Well, you're going to. That's why meditation is such a wonderful tool to understand your attachments and your cravings. But I don't know if I know the full context of the whole beginner mind thing in Zen. I probably don't. But in terms of like going into your meditation with no expectations, that's very important. No expectations. I would even say don't even set a time. Right? If you can, I mean, obviously, if you're like at work and you're taking a break or something like that, you have to set a time. But if you have plenty of time, just let your meditation be as it is. Right? Maybe that day, you just can't do it, only half of what you normally do. Or maybe that day you do it 3 times longer than you normally do. You never know. Right? So it's better not to kind of set a lot of boundaries, right, and expectations in your meditation. Yeah, Johnny John. Okay, yeah, okay, I remember that name. Yes, Peachtree. One of these days, I hope to go back to Peachtree. I love going over to Western West Virginia. Such a wonderful place Peachtree is. Yeah, Robert, possibly. Like I said, because I'm not Mahayana or Zen, there's probably different factors of that I just don't know. Adriana says, no timing sits sounds like worth a try. Yeah, it's nice. And also, don't have any clocks near you, because you'd be like, is it time yet? Oh, come on. I definitely meditated for 40 minutes. Only 10? Dang it. Right? If you're so focused on time, no good. Right? So, setting an alarm is good, but having no focus on time whatsoever, allowing your meditation to unfold as it will, that to me is the best way to do it. Oh yeah, when I was at Bhavana all those years in the meditation hall, there's like 4 clocks. So you can't even just like, okay, I'm going to be like this and I'm going to, no. It's like as soon as you open your eyes, there's at least 1 clock in your field of view. And so I'd be like, oh man. You know what it is? Well, I noticed there were two desires in me. It was either, is this freaking done so I can be over with it, or, oh man, have I reached an awesome blissful meditation where I like 50 minutes went like that, right? So it's like, oh, is it time? That's the mind showing you how it works, showing you its craving. It's Adriana says it's scary how slow time can go sometimes. Yeah, because when you are fully present, right? When you're fully present, time doesn't speed by. It's only when you're distracted that time speeds by. This is why, like I've been interested in like the perception of time in people, right? And if you're doing a novel thing that kind of keeps you present, life seems to be much more slow, right? But if you just get lost in the, work, sleep, family, work, sleep, family, work, sleep, 30 years gone like that. And you're like, what the heck happened? Right? So the more mindful you are in your life, the more practice, the more you practice, the more present you are in day to day, then your life will feel like it's longer. So there you go. That's the way to do it. Ah, the bell. Yeah, the bell is not something that I had to deal with in my personal practice, but yeah. I didn't mind the bell. I only mind the bell once I became a monk and had to do guided meditations. Because so many times my mind's like, oh, this is nice and peaceful. Oh yeah, this is great. Oh, where was I in the guided meditation? Oh, what time do I have to ring the bell? So you can even see me like when I do the guided meditation here, every once in a while, I'm kind of like, okay, what's the time? Okay, gotta check the time. I can't, if I let it go, and it's like the stream is going like an hour later or whatever, and then I was like, everybody's gone. Oh, is it time to end the meditation? So I think I've been told, I've heard that when you get into jhanas, you can set the time out, right? So once I'm able to get into jhanas, then maybe I can be like, okay, 9:30, right? And then all of a sudden my jhana alarm clock rings, and then I can get out of it. But until then, I have to, make sure I'm paying attention. Well, there is a factor of, if there's a balance. This is why I want us to read Sona Sutta, right? There is a factor of, when you're practiced enough, when you're not really doing it as hard as you should, right? And so sometimes you have to be like, okay, no, I am going to sit for 40 minutes or whatever. I am going to do this, right? Sometimes you have to push yourself. Sometimes you got to get the inner drill sergeant out, the monk drill sergeant, and say, listen, do you want to get out of samsara or not? Drop and give me 30 minutes of meditation. Let's go. We got to get the heck out of here. Right? But, other times, especially in the beginning, you can, you don't have the wisdom to know the balance. You haven't picked up your theme yet, right? So it's better to not have too much strictures in that regard, I think. Oh, there's a question. Let me see here. Jason asks, question, thinking about eradication of doubt and stream entry. It seems like a firm, no doubts about anything standard. Can you still be working to accept and understand something and be a stream enter? The doubt in stream entry has to do with the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? When you become a stream enter, the doubt in the teaching, the teacher, the disciples, the doubt in that this path is the path to awakening, all of that vanishes. That's gone. I mean, I'm sure you could probably still have a doubt in, is it a multiverse theory or a string theory, of the universe? Of course, there's lots of those kind of doubts. But this doubt in Buddhism is talking about, your doubt in that the Buddha was awakened, your doubt that the Dhamma can bring you to awakening, your doubt that there's been anybody else who's been awakened, your doubt that you think that you can become awakened. That's what the doubt is. That's what Vicikiccha is, right? That's what doubt is. A stream enter has no more doubts. They've started to see for themselves, right? They've reached a point where they've entered the stream. All they have to do is finish crossing it. Right? So that's a very important thing. Until you're a stream enterer, you will have doubts. Robert asks, so are you actually meditating with us when we're doing a guided meditation on here? When I'm doing a guided meditation, the beginning part, no, because I'm going through, the body scanning, such as such. But once I get to the point where I get you following your breath, then that's when I start I'm also following my breath, right? And interestingly enough, even though I've never done good with guided meditations, me doing a guided meditation is the only time in my life a guided meditation gets me into deep calm. Right? So this is what I mean. Like it's a danger that I'm like, okay, it's getting deep, following the breath. And then I have to kind of wait. Don't go too deep here. You're supposed to be guiding, in about 3-4 minutes, you got to do the next one, kind of a thing. Right? So it's not really, I mean, if there's large chunks of time, then I follow my breath. But otherwise, my mind is kind of like, okay, what's the next one? Although, of course, I've done most of my guided meditations now literally hundreds of times in the last 5 years, right? So mostly I do it without much thinking. But I also like to kind of focus on different things. I like to alternate, the guided meditation and focus on different things more than I did the last time and things like that. So I am kind of trying to make it a little bit novel for you guys because it's basically the same thing, right? There's not that many guided meditations in Buddhism. There's like 6 maybe, right? Maybe 7, maybe, depending on what you consider a guided meditation, right? So it's supposed to be like training wheels, right? Like I give you a set of training wheels and then at a certain point, you know how to do it. So I don't need to tell you anything anymore. And it goes to quiet. That's how it should be. Okay, Arlie Ermy in monk's robes is awesome. I love it. Yeah. Okay, so we've answered the doubt question. Elaine, welcome. Is your daughter with us this time, or did we scare her away last week? Yeah, and having no doubt sounds quite nice. Like, I will say that I'm probably, compared to when I started, I'll give an estimate that like my doubt is probably about 70 to 80% gone. You know, the Buddha's been so right so often in terms of calling out my experience of samsara that, you know, there might be some other truth that I don't know about that might be more truthful than the Buddhist truth. But I studied lots of religions in my anthropology days, and I don't see any. I just don't. So to me, there's nothing more truthful in matching reality than the Buddhist teachings. There's just nothing. Nothing that I found. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been practicing for like 16 years, so I would hope, but it depends. Each person's practice is different. But yes, I would say that, and of course, I'm not making any claims on being anywhere near stream enterer. But in terms of doubt, I've dropped a lot of it. All right. Abby. Welcome, Abby. Good to see you back again. Revery's asking, what are the 20% of doubts you have? Well, I still have doubts on things like karma and rebirth, right? I'm not at 100% on those things. I would say I'm probably in the 90s, but I'm not at 100%. Right. And it makes sense because you're probably not at 100% until you have the three knowledges, right? Where you see your past lives, where you see the beings being born and, moving on according to their karma. Right. So, I would say those are the two things that come to mind the quickest. And I do have, maybe this is left over from earlier depression in my life and all kinds of things and self-doubt. Sometimes I go through phases where I wonder if I could actually become awakened. They don't last that long though, because I've come far enough where I see where it's going, and I do think I can do it. But that's not too often that happens. Oh, Abby has her own YouTube on here now. Okay, welcome. Reverie, you feel you have no doubts whatsoever. Well, that's good. I met a gentleman. He's been on our Discord before. I've known him for a couple of years, and I saw him yesterday for the first time in years. And we were talking, and he said, like, I've never had a Westerner tell me that they're a faith follower. And that was an interesting experience. An interesting talking with him, like how he really, because faith followers do exist. Like, I'm definitely not one of them. So I can't claim to really understand it. But they do exist, right? Faith is a powerful thing. And by faith, I mean like legitimate, like, religious faith, as in they don't really know, but they believe, right? People kind of like to, Westerners kind of like to say like, well, that Sadda really means just confidence. It doesn't mean real, like blind faith. It doesn't mean like that Christian stuff. But there is an element of that in Buddhism, right? There, you can have strong faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, right? Again, not me. So, I had to, my faith, my confidence is hard earned in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. But some people can. It's just the way it is. Robert says the only thing that approaches Buddha Dhamma to me is Stoicism. Yeah, if I wasn't a Buddhist, I'd be a Stoic. There's no doubt about it. The problem with Stoicism and many world religions is they don't really tell you much, like, how should I put this? They don't really kind of point out exactly what's happening in existence in a deep level like the Buddha did, nor do they kind of give you a way really out of it like the Buddha did. Buddhism is pretty unique on a lot of different ways, and this is definitely one of them. Right? Like Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself, turn the other cheek. All wonderful stuff. I love the teachings of Jesus. But he didn't really teach you how to do it. He just told you how to do it, and he kind of was the example himself, right? And Christianity is like trying to be like Jesus, right? So he gave a little bit of an example there. But the Buddha says, you can become awakened. Here's a Noble Eightfold Path. Get started. Get working. Right? So it's like it's so powerful, so pragmatic, so straightforward. So you want to end your suffering? This is how you do it. Start walking, start going down the path. Stoicism is great, but it's more like it's a survival mechanism, Stoicism. It's not a transcending mechanism. Buddhist practice is a transcending mechanism. I just introduced my nephew to Marcus Aurelius meditations, actually, just this past 2 weeks, because he's starting to get involved in getting interested in like politics and philosophy and all that stuff. You can't go wrong with Marcus Aurelius meditations. It's amazing. All right. Oh, chat jump. Let me see here. Elaine says there used to be a festival called Sexapalooza. Yeah, there's a lot of paloozas. What are you going to do? That's why this is the wholesome palooza, the skillful palooza, Dhammapalooza, right? That's how you take a word and change it and skillify it and wholesomify it. Dhammapalooza. Reverie says the thing about Buddhism is if you practice, you get tangible results. Yes, agreed. Abby with an interesting question. Glad to hear. I'm just wondering if you can share some insight. I strongly feel this isn't my first life. Is this an indication of past lives? Could be. I was a weird kid, young Catholic kid who, I'd be like in my little altar boy thing, on the, in the mass, where the priest is, talking a lot, so I don't have to do anything. And my mind would be like, I think I was Alexander. No, maybe I was Julius Caesar. Maybe I was both. Right? So like even as a young Catholic kid, I was thinking in terms of my past lives. So it could mean something, you know. It could also be nothing. Who knows? You know, you have to find out for yourself. That's the way it goes. You know, I do feel like I was born an alien into the Western world in a way, or at least the Italian Catholic world. Like I never felt like I kind of fit in there. My worldview, my perspectives on things just never fit right with me. Right? Nothing did really. I mean, I loved it all. I loved learning about it all, but nothing really fit right with me until Buddhism, and specifically Theravada Buddhism, and specifically the suttas. Once I found the suttas, that was it. And that was like this is you know, more than anything else I've ever experienced, this tells the reality of life to me. So that was my path. So it could be that you know, had, you know, it's an indication of past lives. I can't really say for, you know, 100% one way or another. You know, when I was young, I actually wanted to live forever. I had this idea. I was like, man, I want to be alive to be, you know, to be a starship captain, to go into the stars and all these kind of things, right? And then, thankfully, I watched some shows. I think one was like maybe a Twilight show or something, Twilight Zone, where this guy's in a spaceship and he's basically immortal and he just keeps going on forever and ever. And then I watched The Highlander. Remember the Highlander where, like, you know, you keep living forever and everybody you love keeps dying? And I was like, actually, no, this immortality thing doesn't seem too appealing. Right? Even I was like, you know, and then as I got older, getting more into Buddhism, I was like, oh, this, you know, past life thing is pretty interesting. You know, maybe I might be in a future life, you know, such and such a starship captain. And then I started practicing, you know, deep, and I'm like, oh, wait. Yeah, I don't want to do this again. I mean, you know, I've had my struggles in life like pretty much anybody else. And some people have had more struggles than me. Some people have had less. You know, I don't regret anything that's happened to me in my life or what I've done, but I wouldn't want to do it again. I sure as heck would not want to do it again. So if there's another, like, you know, there's an interesting psychologist who, like, kind of delves into like psychological aspects of like spirituality and things like that. And he's always asked, like, do you believe in God? And he always, it is an interesting, tough question, but the way he answers is, he's like, I act as if I do, right? Because to him, and the pragmatic, this is like the American pragmatic philosophy school. To him, it's like what you say you believe in, it's not really what you believe in. It's what you act out, that what you really believe in, right? So if somebody asks me, do you believe in rebirth? Well, my answer is, I don't know. I'm about 90%, but I essentially act as if I do, right? I essentially live my life as if I do. And again, that's not saying that it was a conscious thing. It's like when I look at myself, when I observe myself, how and why I act as if this is not my, you know, first life. And if I don't practice well, it might not be my last one either. Right? So I guess that's what I have to say for that question. Is it right to give up all goal seeking with meditation? When I first started, I wanted to get the jhanas and have mystical experiences. But now after 4 years, that's all kind of mad with me now. So what you should have is you should have an ideal in front of you, right? You should have a goal. Now, having an aspiration to attain jhanas, no problem with that. No problem. That's a good thing. Really, to have an aspiration to attain jhanas is very good. I have one. You should, if you're trying to follow the Noble Eightfold Path, that's a very good aspiration to attain jhanas. Now, if you're like, I got to attain jhanas, I want to attain jhanas within the next month, right? Or, you're setting a time limit, or you're really being attached to it. You're really, really trying. And in the process, be going further away from jhana, right? Then that's where it's unskillful. That's where it's not helping you, right? Having an aspiration, having a goal ahead of you to strive towards is perfect. It's perfectly fine. It's actually a very good thing. It's getting wrapped up in attachment to that goal, right? And how things should be and how things are going to go and all of that. That's where the suffering comes in. That's what you should let go of. Having an aspiration and a goal, no problem. That's a good thing. Just don't be attached to how it unfolds. Have no expectations for it, right? As I said, most of you probably know my nimitta story. Like, I've been at the doorstep of jhana. Right? I'd never been in jhana, but I saw the nimitta and I was getting in there and I got excited and gone, right? Because excitement is agitation, right? Excitement is kamachanda, right? So a hindrance arose, it went away, right? So, and that happened when I pretty much purposely didn't really learn a lot about jhana because I thought it was way far ahead, right, of where I was. I wasn't even really practicing mindfulness of breathing. My goal was not to get there. But as I was practicing satipatthana, practicing mindfulness, that led to that. My mind and my breath becoming very, very calm, right? The conditions were there, right? I wasn't planning on it, right? Because it is a thing, is like, what do they call it? Like dumb luck or beginner's luck. Sometimes that kind of happens, right? You're not planning on it, but because your mind is not so attached to it, your mind is letting go, being at peace, and then it arises, right? This is the thing. You don't get jhanas. You set the groundwork for it, and jhana arises. That's the way it works. Robert asks, doesn't the Buddha lay out goals, markers to watch for to know whether you're making progress towards enlightenment, though? Yes. Right? You have the 4 stages of enlightenment, right? The stream entry, once returner, non-returner, right? So you have those stages as markers. You have whether you're greed, hatred, and delusion, whether you're craving, whether you're ignorance, right? Whether all of those things are increasing or decreasing. That's another marker, right? Are you getting more angry and agitated or less angry and agitated, right? The Buddha says that's how you know if something is Dhamma or not. Is it leading to more attachment, more craving, more passion, or less attachment, less craving, less passion? If it's leading to less, then it's good Dhamma. Keep practicing. Oh, little jump. Let's see here. Elaine, you're right. Yep, Jordan Peterson. Oh, man, the chat. You guys really got busy. I said the chat's quiet, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I think we're going to just start going. Very good. It's good to see. Oh, Audrey, welcome. Wow, the chat really did get busy. Okay. All right. Okay. So Elaine asks, can I do a blessing for two granddaughters, 13 months and 2.5 years? Wow, Abby's busy. She's running around, taking care of two young kids those ages. Boy, that's a that's a heck of a two ages to have right at the same time. Sure, we can do a little chanting. So, what are their names? Audrey says, I find my Christian upbringing has to be forgotten and my mind has to be retrained in a Buddhist way. Yes and no. I mean, it does, but there's still a lot of good Christian stuff that you can keep, especially in terms of morals and stuff like that. For example, Buddhism, there's no self, no soul, even. I'm not self or soul. Right? There's no permanent soul in Buddhism. It's one of the only religions I know of that there's no permanent soul there. Even in Hinduism, they have a permanent soul. Jason makes a good point. I think a lot of Westerners who find Buddhism are working through wounds from the faith they had before. Yes, of course, without a doubt. I went through that process. Like I don't want to have to faith. What's this faith? I don't want. I have to believe in. I have to follow rules now, and I have to. There's heaven and hell's in Buddhism, and all these things, right? Sure, there's a lot of stuff in there that that cause people to want to have a more kind of secular Buddhism. And to me, unfortunately, you throw a lot of the baby out with the bathwater when you do that. The whole package is very important. It all works together. There's a lot of things that if you kind of take parts out and practice it, and those parts don't have the support of the other parts, then it can cause harm. I mean, not physical harm, but like mental harm and stuff like that. Abby says, or Zeus. Now I'm trying to remember what that's a response to. Zeus. All right, Brandon. Hey, Brandon, welcome. Do you have a favorite teaching from Ajahn Chah? Oh, that's a tough one. An absolute favorite teaching? Let's see, what comes to mind first? Oh, I have a favorite Dhamma talk from Ajahn Chah. My favorite Dhamma talk from Ajahn Chah is called In the Dead of Night. I think that's the best Ajahn Chah there is. Right? The striving, right? striving strongly and and crying and eyesight going yellow from pee, not needing to pee, and all kinds of. Read it. Read it. Facing your fears. Good Dhamma. Understanding good Dhamma. In the Dead of Night, that's my favorite, without a doubt. After that, Our Real Home is one that I like. Ajahn Chah, one of the reasons why I think I'm so connected to Ajahn Chah is because I see a lot of myself in him. Like the same kind of tendencies, the like to kind of like push people's buttons, be a little bit of a troll. I see a lot of myself in Ajahn Chah, right? Not the whole awakened thing, but like a lot of like the personality tendencies and things like that. I love the fact that he's like pushes people's buttons so that they can see their defilements. That's the greatest thing. I love that. Of course, it has to be done in a wise way. And the person you're doing it to has to kind of know that you have their best interest at heart, that you're doing it for a good reason. Abby's phone died. Says thank you. Well, Abby's very welcome. A Millionaire says Space Bante would be a show I would watch. See, A Millionaire, you're new to me. You haven't heard me talk about being volunteering to be the first monk on Mars. I even got the colors right. And if I was on Mars, then I would have really good internet. Of course, I couldn't do a live stream because it would be a 17-minute. Because when I lived at Bhavana, the internet was so bad. I was like, the internet on Mars would be really good. There'd just be a 17-minute delay. Robert, you're not born too early. Robert says, I feel like I was born too early. I see all the racism and misogyny, etc. Are you kidding me with this nonsense? Do you think that's going to go away? As long as people have greed, hatred, and delusion, people will have greed. People will do things out of greed, hatred, and delusion. There's no utopia in Buddhism. Right? People will always act stupidly in one way or another. Now, how those ways are might change a little bit, but greed, hatred, and delusion, samsara is samsara. That's not going to change. You know, instead of people hating each other for the color of their skin, it'll turn into people hating each other for the color of their eyes. I used to read a fantasy novel where like the light eyes were like the higher class and the dark eyes were like the lower class kind of a thing. Right? That's human nature. That's part of the having the in group, out group, right? The what's it called? Yeah, I guess in group, out group preference. Yeah. So that's how we are. Right? That's just the way it is. And I don't see that magically changing. Maybe if we become like Borgs, like on Star Trek, where like you kind of lose all individuality. And like, you know, we will, what did they say on Star Trek? Assimilate or something like that. Right? Maybe if you become Borgs, it'll be like that. But other than that, I don't see it. Maxwell, anti-aging. You're talking about Audrey de Grey, and he's not. Many people in his many people don't really feel like there's a to some people there's kind of a hard limit of about 140 years for humans, right? So he's one of very few people that think, hey, we can live for thousands of years. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I remember a couple of years ago him saying there are people alive today, and not just children, that if we do things the right way, they could live to 3,000 years. It doesn't really matter in Buddhism. I mean, in Buddha, there are existences in Buddhism, in the Buddhist cosmology, that last 80,000 years or 80,000 eons. So couple thousand years, that doesn't change anything, any of the Buddhist teachings or anything like that. Even if you were to live to, there's scientific ways that human beings could technically live until the end of the universe, right? Or after all the stars are gone, living by black holes and all. I mean, like there's all trillions, hundreds of trillions, hundreds of thousands of trillions of years, right? Even if somebody lived that long, unless they figure out how to get away, get out of the universe, it's done, right? So I've yet to see a way out of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and soullessness. Who knows? Elaine, Jordan Peterson's not Buddhism, so I'm not going to go into it deeply. But since 2016, I've listened to literally hundreds of hours of his stuff. Really interesting stuff. I quite like it. I think he's doing a lot of good in the world. So, Elaine, Toilets on the Path. Toilets on the Path by Ajahn Chah is also a very good, because Ajahn Chah said, what does he say? Something like, if you can't keep the toilets clean, how do you expect to become awakened? He's yelling at a bunch of monks who are not keeping things clean and like, oh, you want to go off and meditate, but you don't keep the paths clean. You don't keep the toilets clean. You think you're going to become awakened that way? That's a good one. Yeah. Oh, Ivy May and Isla. All right. Are you still here? Is she still here? Abby and Elaine? Robert, hell is I wouldn't call hell functionally infinite. Again, you have to change your time frame perspectives when it comes to samsara, right? Heavens and hells, there's just lots of eons, right? But eventually it's over. It's all impermanent, right? There is a being in samsara that if you're able to practice the arupa attainments, some people call them the formless jhanas, but they're not really jhanas, at least according to the early text. But so if you're able to practice like those arupa attainments, then you could become born as a completely mind-made only being. And that lasts like 84,000 eons or something like that, right? You can be as this being for a long, long time. Brandon is talking about free books from Ajahn Chah. You can also go to, I think it's ajahnchay.org or ajahnchay.com. You can also get, which is my favorite thing, amaravati.org, the monastery in England has voice recorded 57 talks from Ajahn Chah. I've listened to those 57 talks, like when I was walking at Bhavana, walking in the woods and stuff. I've listened to those talks at least 5 or 6 times each. You know, they're amazing stuff. Robert's like, I watched a lot of Star Trek growing up. Yeah, Star Trek is very utopian. I tend to think life is probably going to be more like 40K, Warhammer 40K. In the grim future, there is only war. No, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe it'll be a middle ground between Star Trek and Warhammer 40K. All right. Adriana, wonderful statement. Even if you could live forever, you'd still have dukkha. Yes, yes, you would. That's the best statement of the day at the night, I think. Well, you know, Robert says I wouldn't even want to live to 1,000 years. I've thought about this, like, because if I make it to like 90 something, that will be a point where like there's lots of life extending things. Like, I mean, I don't mean like thousands of years, but like, you know, organs and such as like they could, you know, there might be a point, like, so I might be like the last generation, like, of Buddhist monks that has to think about like, should I make a point in just letting myself die naturally, or should I just accept, like you accept anything in the health field, that you take something to keep you healthier longer? It's an interesting dilemma. I don't know yet. I'm gonna have to see how it turns out. All right. So it looks like Elaine and, you know, I'm not going to do any chanting for the girls when they're not here. So I'll have to wait for that. Dhammapalooza for 1,000 years. Oh, God. By that point, I'll have people joining the stream from Mars and from maybe some of the inner asteroid field stations. Maybe even Jupiter, who knows? All right. Okay, so we've come to I can't remember the last Dhammapalooza where we went like basically a straight hour and a half just discussing in Q&A. So we're at the half-hour mark, so we should do our guided meditation. All right. So sit in whatever position is comfortable for you that you meditate in. Begin by bringing your awareness to your feet as we start some body scanning. By bringing your awareness, this means to become aware of any sensations or feeling that arises in your field of awareness. such as perhaps the feeling of the feet pressing against the floor, or an itch or something like that. Whatever you can feel in the body part that you're currently scanning through. As we go through each part, check to make sure that that part is comfortably positioned in a way that also supports the good balanced posture. Having a good balanced posture will go a long way in you having to deal with less pain and being able to sit for longer. Bring your awareness up through your ankles and your calves, up to your knees. Your thighs. What is the feeling of the thighs pressing against the chair, couch, cushion? If you have trouble coming into contact with any sensations, you can prompt yourself by asking, what do I see? What do I feel? And see if anything arises from that. Bring your awareness up to your pelvis and hips. This is an important area that has major implications on your posture. How your pelvis is positioned affects both your lower and upper body, especially the position of the spine. So it's important to take some time. Bring your awareness to that pelvis, hips, and buttocks to set yourself in a good posture. When you're ready, bring your awareness up to your upper body, through your abdomen and your chest. Check the position of your spine. Let it be resting comfortably in its natural position, not stretched out. Check to see your upper body is not leaning and slouching. Check to see that your shoulders are hanging loosely, not scrunched up and tight. Bring your awareness down through your elbows and your hands. Check to see that they are in a comfortable position that supports your posture, doesn't cause leaning and slouching. And finally, bring your awareness to your head. Check to see that the head is resting comfortably on the spine. It's not leaning or slouching, with the chin parallel to the floor. And when you're done setting up your body in a comfortable and stable position, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, we do not wish to manipulate or control the breath in any way. This body has been breathing from the second you were born and will continue to do so until the moment you die. It doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is to simply abide with the breath, to observe and investigate. Watch as this body breathes in. Watch as this body breathes out. This body is always breathing, with or without you noticing. It's always there, waiting for you to come back, be with the breath, take a break from all of our burdens that we carry, all the worries and burdens about family and friends, work and school, all such things that will come to our mind as we practice. Just as the mighty Atlas holds up the world on his shoulders, so too do we each hold our world on our shoulders, a heavy burden. For the time of this meditation, lay your world down. There'll be plenty of time to pick up your burdens again later. But for now, stay with the breath. As you're following the breath, your mind will become distracted or bored. You'll want to wander to the past or future, the other side of the planet or galaxy, or perhaps a sound or something will come from the outside and distract you. Whenever you get distracted, there'll be a point where you start to have enough mindfulness coming around that you realize that you've been taken from the breath. At that point, fully acknowledge that you've been distracted from the breath. Come back to mindfulness. Then practice letting go of the distraction by neither getting agitated and pushing it away, nor getting excited and clinging on to it. Try to not give it any energy and let it be. If you're able to do so, it will persist for as long as it's meant to, and then it will cease. Return to the breath over and over. Acknowledge, let go, and return. The breath is home. Always return to the breath. Every once in a while, check in with the state of your mind. Is your mind becoming more peaceful and tranquil or not? As your mind does become more tranquil, you may begin to notice more subtle, harder to see characteristics of the breath. You might see how the breath is changing. Sometimes the breath is long and deep, sometimes short and shallow. See if you can observe these more refined characteristics of the breath as you follow it in and out of your body. Start to notice impermanence. Slowly start to come from the internal to the external, opening your eyes, bringing awareness back to the room that you're in, to the live stream, and your Dhamma friends in the chat. All right. So, friends, we only have a couple minutes left. Let's do our sharing of merits. So for today, let's add, where's the girls' names? Not Zeus. Where are they? Ivy, May, and Isla. Let's add Ivy, May, and Isla to our thoughts as we do our sharing of merits. May they be healthy, happy, and don't put their mother and father or whoever through too much of a runaround. Boy, those are tough ages. But so Ivy, May, and Isla, we'll keep those the two girls in our thoughts, the two babies, as we share our merits for this wonderful Dhammapalooza. Dukkha patta chani dukkha, bhaya patta chani bhaya, soka patta chani soka, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata cha ammehi, sampadang punya sampadang, sabbe deva anumodantu, sabba sampatti siddhiya, akasata chabumata deva naga mahiddhika, punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share in this merit of ours for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. Nobody's typed in the chat, but it says we have 11 people here. So I will say good night. So we are doing currently, although I'm going to be on retreat this week, so it's going to be a little bit off. But every right now, Saturday through Tuesday in the mornings at 8:30, we're doing a morning monastery experience on this channel, which is a little bit of chanting, little bit of precepts, and a little Dhamma talk. So it's a good way to start the Dhamma off with some friends, with some Dhamma friends, community, and some Dhamma, right, for us to reflect on. And as always, I should be back here. Oh, hey, Jen. Welcome. So as always, I will be back for next week, Dhammapalooza. I might be a little bit tired, although I won't be driving. Reed and I are going to be coming back from the retreat at that point. And it might be fairly late in the afternoon when we get back. But Dhammapalooza will go on. So, okay, friends, I'll either see you in the mornings or see you on the Discord or see you next week. So, friends, until next time, I wish you a very spiritually successful and peaceful week. Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy. Practice well and be well. So actually, one last thing. If you are interested in learning about the early Buddhist texts and studying them and learning how to live and practice by them, you're welcome to join us on our Discord Sangha. So you can send an email to magaseka@gmail.com. And Adriana or myself or Reed or Shab will get in contact with you. Okay, friends. Have a nice night.